When people talk about living abroad without speaking the language, they usually frame it as a skills problem: communication, efficiency, convenience. If you don't speak the language, things take longer. You misunderstand people. You make mistakes at offices and stores. And the standard advice follows naturally: just learn the language. Use translation apps like Google. You'll adapt. This explanation feels complete because it's functional. It answers how things work. But functional explanations often hide structural consequences. And structure, not inconvenience, is where the real cost lives. To understand this properly, you have to stop thinking about language as communication and start thinking about it as positioning. Language is not just how you speak, it's the interface between you and every system you touch: bureaucracy, healthcare, housing, conflict, negotiation. When you don't control the interface, you don't control outcomes, you just react to them. This already puts you at a structural disadvantage, but it still doesn't explain the deeper shift. Here's what actually happens psychologically. When you don't speak the language, your expression collapses into the minimum viable version of yourself. You reduce your vocabulary. You avoid nuance. You stop explaining context. Not because you want to, but because cognitive load punishes complexity. Over time, your inner life and your outward expression decouple. You still think in full resolution, but you can only act in low resolution. That gap is where identity strain begins. Power flows toward the side that explains rules, interprets ambiguity, and defines what's normal. When you don't speak the language, you lose access to all three. You don't argue the rules, you accept the interpretations. You don't challenge outcomes, you adapt to them. You don't shape norms, you comply with them. This is not oppression, it's structural asymmetry, and it changes behavior long before it changes beliefs. At this point, the obvious conclusion seems to be the solution is mastery, fluency, speaking the language fluently. But here's where the model breaks, because even fluent foreigners often experience the same pressure, which tells you something critical. Language proficiency reduces friction, but it does not restore native positioning. And that brings me to this. The real issue is not language, it's agency preservation. Living abroad without the language forces you into a dependent posture, and posture shapes identity faster than ideology ever could. You stop pushing boundaries, you stop escalating conflicts, you stop asserting preferences, not consciously, but strategically, because every assertion costs more energy than it returns. Over time, you internalize the strategy, and once strategy becomes habit, habit becomes identity. This is why people describe life abroad as peaceful, right before they admit they feel smaller. The danger isn't initial difficulty, it's long term adaptation to constrained agency. By the time you realize what's happened, your routines depend on it, your relationships assume it, your life architecture is built around it. At that point, change is no longer additive, it's destructive. You're not learning a language, you're dismantling a self that learned how to survive without one. So, yes, you can live abroad without speaking the language, But the more important question is this: what kind of person does that environment slowly require you to become? Because systems don't just shape outcomes, they shape the people who remain inside them long enough. And once adaptation feels like identity, leaving costs more than staying ever did.